Mark sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall as the weight of the previous days pressed heavily on his chest. He had managed to put on a brave face at dinner, but inside, turmoil raged like a storm. Each memory of Lucy's laughter felt like a dagger. Each reminder of William's smugness gnawed at him deeper. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the messages, reading the words from friends and acquaintances offering support. But no text could heal the gaping wound of betrayal. The reality of his situation was undeniable. The two people he trusted most had shattered his world. "Hey, Mark." Shane's voice broke through the silence. He stepped into the room, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "I think we need to talk." "Talk?" Mark replied, his tone flat. "What's there to talk about? Lucy has made her choice." "Exactly," Shane said, crossing his arms. "But that doesn't mean you should just sit here and let them dictate how your life unfolds. You've got options." Mark looked up, intrigued despite himself. "Options? What do you mean?" "First off, let's not forget who you are. You're a fighter. You don't have to just accept this. You can confront them, gather evidence if you need to, and make decisions that suit you." "Confront them?" Mark scoffed, the idea sending a mix of anger and fear through him. What would that achieve? "It's not like Lucy is going to suddenly realize she made a mistake." Shane stepped closer, his voice lowering to a more serious tone. "You're right. It might not change anything for her. But it could change everything for you. You deserve to know the truth, all of it. You can't just walk away and let them live happily ever after while you're left in the dust." Mark's heart raced at the thought. He had spent too long feeling powerless. Perhaps Shane was right. "What do you suggest?" "Let's set a plan. We can gather evidence, anything that confirms this affair. Then we can figure out your next move, whether that's confronting them or taking it to the next level. You're not alone in this." As Mark considered Shane's words, a flicker of resolve ignited within him. He had always prided himself on his ability to stand firm, to face challenges head-on. Maybe this was a challenge he could conquer. "Okay, I'm in, but I need to be careful. I don't want to create a scene. Not yet." "Agreed. We'll approach this strategically." Shane nodded, a hint of a smile breaking through his serious demeanor. "I'll help you watch them, gather what you need. We'll document everything." Mark felt a rush of adrenaline at the prospect of reclaiming control over his life. "Let's do it." As the two men formulated their plan, Mark felt a sense of purpose returning. He would no longer be the victim in this twisted narrative. He would gather the truth, and then he would decide what to do next. The next few days were filled with tension. Mark played the part of the oblivious husband while secretly working with Shane to collect evidence. They devised subtle ways to observe Lucy and William, often coordinating their efforts under the guise of casual outings. One evening, Mark casually mentioned a business trip to Lucy, ensuring she didn't suspect anything amiss. As she smiled, packing her things for a weekend getaway, he fought the rising bile in his throat. He knew she was meeting William, but the thought of it still stung. The night before her trip, Mark and Shane positioned themselves at a distance outside the restaurant where Lucy had arranged to meet William. They watched as she arrived, dressed beautifully, her smile radiant. It felt like a knife twisting in his gut, but he steeled himself. "There they are," Shane whispered, eyes focused on the scene unfolding before them. Mark's heart raced as he watched William lean in to kiss Lucy's cheek, a gesture that once felt innocent, but now felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind. "They're really doing this," Mark murmured, barely able to comprehend the scene. "After everything." Shane placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay focused. We're here for the truth, remember?" As they watched, the couple engaged in laughter and intimate conversations. Mark felt like an outsider in his own life, his heart heavy with the reality of their connection. But he remained rooted in his resolve. He needed proof, something to show Lucy that the trust between them was irreparably broken. After what felt like an eternity, they captured moments on their phones. William's arm draped around Lucy's shoulders, the way she leaned into him as they shared secrets over dinner. It was the evidence Mark had hoped for, yet it felt like a hollow victory. The following days passed in a blur of emotions. Each moment felt like a roller coaster: anger, sadness, resolve. Yet Mark kept himself busy, organizing the photos and notes they had gathered. He planned a confrontation, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. On the day he chose, Mark felt a mix of adrenaline and dread. He invited Lucy to dinner at their favorite restaurant, suggesting it was time to reconnect. As they sat across from each other, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension. "Mark, is everything okay?" Lucy asked, concern flickering in her eyes. "You've seemed distant lately." "Distant?" he echoed, the word feeling foreign. "Maybe it's time we talked about what's really going on." Her expression shifted, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean, Lucy. The late nights, the mysterious texts. I've seen enough to know you're hiding something." He leaned in closer, his heart racing as he prepared to reveal the truth. "Mark, please." Lucy's voice wavered. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You and William have been having an affair, haven't you?" The words hung in the air, a thunderous accusation. For a moment, Lucy froze, her eyes wide with shock. Then, something in her shifted. Fear morphed into defiance. "How dare you accuse me of that?" Mark pulled out his phone and slid it across the table, displaying the photos they had taken. "These tell a different story." Lucy's face paled as she scrolled through the images, each one a reminder of her betrayal. "Mark, No more excuses," he interrupted, his voice steady. "This isn't just a misunderstanding. You chose this. You chose him." As the reality of her actions sank in, the fight drained from Lucy's posture. "I never wanted it to come to this. Yet here we are," Mark replied, the pain in his voice undeniable. "You need to understand. I'm done being the fool in this situation." Silence engulfed them, the tension palpable as Lucy's eyes brimmed with tears. "I'm sorry, Mark. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" he demanded, hurt spilling over. "What did he offer you that I didn't?" Lucy hesitated, her expression shifting from guilt to confusion. "It's complicated. William is charming. He made me feel desired again." "Desired?" Mark echoed, incredulous. "What about our vows? What about our family?" "Those things are important, but it just happened," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought it would be a fling, a way to feel alive again. I didn't think it would go this far." Mark's heart sank further. "So, you never thought about what it would do to me? To our children?" At that moment, Mark saw the weight of her decisions reflected in her eyes. The realization of the devastation she had caused seemed to hit her like a wave. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't want apologies, Lucy. I want honesty. What do you want now? Do you want to stay with me, with him?" Lucy looked away, the conflict evident in her expression. "I don't know. I feel lost." "Then maybe it's time to really think about what you want," Mark replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I won't be a second choice, Lucy. Not anymore." As they left the restaurant, a heavy silence enveloped them. Mark felt a strange mix of relief and despair. He had confronted her, laid bare the truth, yet the path ahead felt uncertain. They drove home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Mark's mind raced with possibilities, each one more daunting than the last. What would happen next? Would Lucy choose him or William? As they entered their home, Mark's heart pounded with anxiety. He felt the need to take control of his life back, to not let this define him. "I need time," he said finally, breaking the silence. "I need to figure out what this means for me." Lucy nodded, her expression somber. "I understand." As he walked away, Mark couldn't shake the feeling of being at a crossroads. The choices ahead were unclear, but one thing was certain. He would not remain a pawn in their game any longer. Mark's journey was just beginning, and he was determined to emerge from the ashes stronger than ever. The confrontation had awakened something within him, a fighter spirit that had lain dormant for too long. And as he prepared for the next chapter, He knew he would no longer be defined by their actions. He would reclaim his narrative, one way or another. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Mark. The confrontation had opened a floodgate, leaving him to navigate a sea of uncertainty. He felt like he was walking a tightrope, balancing between the remnants of his marriage and the pull of a new beginning. At work, he tried to focus on his responsibilities, but thoughts of Lucy and William loomed like a dark cloud over his head. Every meeting felt surreal, every conversation a reminder of the turmoil brewing in his personal life. His colleagues noticed his distraction, but Mark brushed off their concerns with a forced smile. "Just a lot on my mind," he'd say, the words feeling hollow. Meanwhile, Lucy seemed to retreat into herself. She took to staying late at work or going for long runs, seeking solace in solitude. Mark wanted to reach out, to understand her better, but the walls between them felt insurmountable. The silence in their home echoed louder than the words left unsaid. One evening, after a long day, Mark found himself sitting on the couch, lost in thought. He glanced at the clock, 7:30 p.m. Lucy should have been home by now. A nagging sense of worry crept in, the kind that clawed at his insides. Was she with William again? Just then, his phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. It was a message from Shane. "Shane, let's meet. I have something important to discuss." Mark's heart raced. He quickly typed a response, arranging to meet at their usual spot, a quiet bar on the outskirts of town. As he drove, his mind raced with possibilities. What could Shane have uncovered? When Mark arrived, he found Shane already seated at a corner table, a drink in hand. The tension in the air was palpable, and Mark could see it mirrored in Shane's expression. "What's going on?" Mark asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "I have news about Lucy and William," Shane replied, his voice low. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "I've been doing some digging, trying to figure out just how deep this goes," Shane said, leaning in closer. "And what I found is, well, let's just say it's worse than we thought." Mark's heart raced. "What did you find?" "Lucy isn't just seeing William. She's been involved with him for a lot longer than you realized. They have a whole history together, years of secrets that you don't know about." Mark felt like the ground beneath him had shifted. Years? How is that possible? She never mentioned anything. Shane shook his head. "That's the thing. They've been meeting up for special occasions, family events, all while pretending to be normal. It's almost like they had this double life." The realization hit Mark like a punch to the gut. But why? Why would she keep this from me? Power dynamics, Mark. Sometimes people get caught up in something they think is exciting. And maybe she didn't want to lose what she had with you, but also craved something different with him. The thought made Mark feel sick. What do I do with this information? Confront her again? Maybe not yet. We need to gather more evidence first. If this is as deep as I suspect, you'll want something solid before making any accusations. Mark nodded, trying to process the information. "I can't believe this is happening. I thought I knew her." "Remember, it's not just about the affair," Shane added, his tone serious. "It's about your marriage, your family. We have to tread carefully." Mark left the bar feeling more confused than ever. He had wanted answers, but the truth only made everything more complicated. The next day, as he sat at his desk, Mark felt the weight of Shane's words pressing down on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was in a game he didn't understand. Each moment spent with Lucy felt like a mask over a reality he was just beginning to uncover. When Lucy finally returned home that evening, Mark tried to engage her in conversation, but her demeanor was distant. She seemed lost in her own world, avoiding his gaze. "Everything okay?" he asked, feigning casualness. "Just tired," she replied, but there was an edge to her voice. Mark could sense the tension bubbling beneath the surface. "Want to talk about it?" he ventured, hoping to break through the barrier. "No, not really," she shot back, and Mark felt a pang of hurt at her dismissiveness. "Fine," he said, frustration boiling over. "But I need to know what's going on with us. You can't keep shutting me out." Lucy looked up, her expression defensive. "I'm not shutting you out, I just need time." Time? For what? To figure out how to continue lying to me? His voice rose, surprising even himself. Mark, don't do this, she warned, her eyes flashing. You're only making it worse. Then tell me what's really going on, he demanded, his emotions getting the better of him. I don't know how to explain it, Lucy cried, tears brimming in her eyes. It's complicated. Complicated how? Mark pressed, his heart racing. You've been sneaking around behind my back with my best friend. Stop it, Lucy shouted, the rawness of her voice cutting through the tension. You don't understand what I was going through. Mark felt the heat of anger wash over him. So cheating was the answer? Running to him was the solution? Don't you dare judge me, she shot back, her voice cracking. You have no idea what it's like to feel lost, to feel like you're not enough. Enough for whom? For William? He's been feeding you lies. Maybe he has, but you've been so wrapped up in your own world that I felt invisible. Lucy's voice trembled with emotion. You were always busy, Mark. I needed someone to see me. By having an affair? Mark shook his head in disbelief. Is that really the best you could come up with? Lucy fell silent, the weight of her choices hanging heavily between them. The raw vulnerability in her eyes made Mark's anger falter, but he pushed through it. You need to decide, Lucy. Do you want to be with me or him? I don't know, she whispered, the tears spilling over. I feel so trapped. Then it's time to make a choice, Mark said, his voice steady. You can't keep playing both sides, it's tearing us apart. As Lucy retreated to their bedroom, Mark felt a mix of relief and despair. The conversation had revealed cracks in their relationship, but it also highlighted the chasm that had formed between them. He had confronted her, yet the answers remained frustratingly out of reach. That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Mark felt the weight of the decision ahead. He needed to know where they stood, and he couldn't wait any longer for Lucy to figure it out on her own. The next morning, he decided to take matters into his own hands. He texted Shane, asking to meet again. They had gathered enough evidence, and it was time to confront the reality of the situation. At the bar, Mark felt a sense of determination settle over him as he met Shane. We need to do this, he said, a fire ignited in his gut. I can't keep living like this, Shane nodded, his expression supportive. I'll help you gather the final pieces of evidence. We need to present a solid case to Lucy. It's time she sees the whole picture. Exactly, Mark agreed. I want her to know that I won't stand for being blindsided. It's time to take control back. As they mapped out their plan, Mark felt a sense of clarity washing over him. He might be facing the hardest battle of his life, but he would no longer let Lucy and William dictate his story. He would reclaim his narrative, whatever it took. Days turned into a blur of planning and strategizing. Mark and Shane documented Lucy and William's encounters, piecing together the timeline of betrayal. Mark felt like a detective in a twisted mystery, gathering clues to unveil the truth. When the day of confrontation finally arrived, Mark's heart raced with anticipation and dread. He had invited Lucy for dinner again, this time under the pretense of discussing their future. He needed her to be calm, to be present. As they sat at the dinner table, Mark's hands trembled slightly, betraying his resolve. Lucy entered, a hint of confusion in her eyes, but Mark put on a brave face. We need to talk about everything. Again? She replied, a hint of frustration creeping into her tone. Can't we just enjoy this meal? No, Lucy, this is important, Mark said firmly, his voice steady. I've been gathering evidence, and I need you to hear me out. Lucy's expression shifted, a flicker of fear crossing her face. Evidence? What are you talking about? Mark pulled out his phone, heart pounding as he displayed the photos and notes they had collected. This is what I've been working on. You can't keep denying it. As Lucy scrolled through the images, her face went pale. The realization hit her like a freight train, and tears began to fall. Mark, No more excuses, he interrupted, the pain in his chest intensifying. You need to face the reality of what you've done. I never meant to hurt you, Lucy cried, her voice trembling. It got out of hand. Out of hand? Mark felt a surge of anger. This was a choice. You made a conscious decision to betray me over and over again. I thought it was just a fling, a way to escape, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't realize how much I would hurt you. Mark's heart ached, but he fought through the emotional storm. What did you think would happen? Did you think I would just accept this? That I'd sit quietly while you played house with my best friend? Lucy's sobs filled the room, a mixture of regret and despair. I was scared. I felt lost and alone. Then why didn't you come to me? Mark's voice softened slightly, the anger giving way to a deeper hurt. I would have listened. We could have worked through this. I didn't think you'd understand, she whispered, her eyes filled with remorse. The silence hung heavy between them, and Mark felt a flicker of hope. Lucy, we can fix this, but only if you truly want to. You have to choose. As Lucy wiped her tears, Mark realized that the path ahead was unclear. They had reached a crossroad, and the decision lay firmly in Lucy's hands. Would she choose him, or would she continue down the path of betrayal with William? Mark's heart raced with anticipation, the weight of their future hanging in the balance. With the evidence laid bare, Mark hoped they could find a way forward. But he knew that the real work was just beginning. Trust had been shattered, and healing would take time. As he watched Lucy, her tears mingling with the pain of their past, Mark realized that love could endure even in the face of betrayal. But it required honesty, courage, and the willingness to confront the demons that had driven them apart. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Mark felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever happened next, he was ready to fight for the love they once shared. And he hoped, with all his heart, that Lucy would choose to fight alongside him. The air was thick with tension as Mark stood at the edge of the garden, staring at the house. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets he didn't want to hear. Charlotte's words echoed in his mind. You deserve to know the truth. After the emotional turmoil of the last few days, he felt more resolute than ever. Tonight he would confront Lucy and William, and he needed answers. As he stepped inside, he could hear laughter from the living room. William's voice was unmistakable, smooth and charming, the very sound that had haunted Mark's thoughts. Gathering his courage, he walked in. Mark, Lucy exclaimed, her face lighting up momentarily before quickly shifting to concern. You're back early. Yeah, he replied, keeping his tone steady. I wanted to talk to both of you, alone. The laughter faded, and the atmosphere shifted. William straightened, an unreadable expression on his face. Sure, let's chat. What's on your mind? Mark's heart raced. I know about you two. I know about the affair. Silence enveloped the room. Lucy's eyes widened, and William's face hardened, but he quickly masked it with a smile. Mark, let's not jump to conclusions here. Jump to conclusions. How long has this been going on? Mark pressed, his voice rising. You both thought you could hide it forever? Lucy looked torn, guilt flashing across her face. Mark, please. No, he cut her off. I deserve the truth. How long? Years, William finally admitted, his tone surprisingly calm. It started when you were busy with work. We didn't plan for it to happen, but feelings developed. Mark felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. Years. The betrayal stung deeper than any knife. You're both sick. This was my life you toyed with. Mark, you don't understand, Lucy pleaded. It was complicated. I never wanted to hurt you. Complicated, he echoed, incredulity dripping from his words. This isn't complicated. It's selfish. You made a choice. The silence grew heavy. Lucy looked like she might cry, but Mark felt nothing but rage. And what about the kids? Did you think about them when you decided to betray their father? That's not fair, William interjected. We were trying to keep things stable for everyone. Stable? Mark scoffed. You call this stable? You've turned my life into a circus and I'm supposed to just accept it? Let's not make this worse, William said, his voice low but steady. We can work through this. Work through this? Mark laughed bitterly. You mean I should just accept your apologies and move on? No, I'm done. I won't be a fool any longer. As he turned to leave, Lucy's voice trembled. Mark, please don't go. We can fix this. Fix this, he repeated, disbelief etched on his face. You think I want to fix a marriage built on lies? You've shown me who you really are. I'm done. With that, he stepped outside, the weight of the confrontation pressing heavily on his chest. The cool night air was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside him. He felt liberated yet heartbroken, knowing there was no going back. As he walked away, he glanced back at the house, now a monument of betrayal. The darkness felt like a blanket wrapping around him, both comforting and terrifying. He had to figure out what came next. Without them. The air was thick with tension as Mark stood at the entrance of his home, the memories of the past few weeks flooding back. He had navigated a storm of emotions, betrayal, anger, and a flicker of hope. But now it was time for the ultimate confrontation. He could feel the weight of his decisions pressing down on him like a heavy cloak. Inside, the house felt eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos in his mind. He walked through the living room, taking in the familiar surroundings that now felt foreign. The photographs on the wall, once symbols of happiness, now mocked him with their frozen smiles. He spotted a picture of Lucy and their children on a beach vacation, her laughter seemingly echoing in his ears. As he moved towards the kitchen, he could hear the faint sound of Lucy's voice, muffled and indistinct. Was she on the phone? He paused, his heart racing. This could be the moment everything changed. Should he confront her now or wait? The thought of waiting felt like torture, yet he knew he needed to be strategic. Taking a deep breath, Mark pushed open the kitchen door. Lucy stood at the counter, her back to him, seemingly engrossed in her phone. He cleared his throat, making his presence known. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to apprehension. Mark, she said, her voice low and cautious. You're home early. Yeah, I needed to talk, he replied, trying to keep his tone steady. The stakes were high, and he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head. Lucy set her phone down, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. Is this about everything? Everything, he confirmed, feeling a swell of anger rise within him. I know about you and William. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Lucy's face paled, and for a moment Mark thought she might deny it. But instead she looked down, her hands trembling slightly. Mark, save it, he cut her off, his voice firm. I don't want to hear excuses. You've betrayed me, our children, everything we built together. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Mark steeled himself against the pang of sympathy. You think this is easy for me? She pleaded. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought, what? That I wouldn't find out? That it wouldn't matter? His voice rose, fueled by a mix of rage and disbelief. You had an affair with my best friend for years. How do you think that feels? Lucy opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The silence between them felt like an abyss, each second stretching longer than the last. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It just did. Mark shook his head in frustration. Just did? That's your justification? You let it go on for years and now you expect me to just accept it? I loved you, Mark, she cried, desperation in her voice. But I was lost. I thought I could have both, a loving husband and someone who made me feel alive. Alive? He echoed, incredulous. You think cheating is living? You've destroyed everything we had. Our children deserve better than this. The mention of their children seemed to hit Lucy harder than he expected. Her shoulders sagged, and tears rolled down her cheeks. I know, she admitted, her voice breaking. I messed up, but I want to fix this. I want to save our family. Mark took a step back, the pain in his chest tightening. And how do you plan to do that, with William still in the picture? You think I can just forget? You've shattered my trust. I'll end it with him, she promised, reaching out as if to touch him, but he flinched away. I swear I will. I want us to be a family again. Words mean nothing now, Lucy, he said, his voice cold. You've shown me who you really are. I can't just erase the memories of you with him. What do you want from me? she asked, frustration mingling with sorrow. What can I do to make this right? Honestly, he said, his voice lowering to a somber tone. I don't know if you can. I need time to think. But you need to figure out what you want too. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lucy standing in the kitchen, the reality of her actions settling in the space between them. As he stepped outside, the cool breeze brushed against his face, refreshing yet bittersweet. Mark knew this was far from over. The journey ahead would be filled with pain, confusion, and perhaps a glimmer of hope. But for now, he needed space. Space to breathe, to think, and to decide what came next. As he stood on the porch looking out at the horizon, Mark felt a mix of anger and sadness. His world had been turned upside down, but he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The fight for his family and for his own heart was just beginning.